Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Sewell, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey, guys, and welcome back to the Regional Rasslin Podcast, where we talk the territories. I'm, as always, Ray Russell, and this week, guys, we dive back into Georgia Championship Wrestling circa 1981, coming out of Thanksgiving night in the Omni, guys. And in order to talk about the next 2 weeks of TV and maybe a little more, going to bring him back onto the show right now. Welcome back, Jammie Ward.
Hey, Ray. How's it going, big guy?
What's up,
Wonderful
brother?
to be back.
Good to have you back. It's always good to talk a little Georgia here on Regional Rasslin, and even better to just talk with Jammie.
Very true. I'd love to talk to Raymond.
Well, let's see.
Because everybody loves Raymond.
Well, if that was my full first name, then I would agree. But it is simply Ray.
You're not.
No,
you're just simply Ray. Good for you, because I'm just Jammie. So just two guys going to talk some Georgia wrestling.
Yeah, named after my grandfather, and nothing wrong with that. Last we left off, Jammie, we were talking about Thanksgiving night in the Omni, which is a very big night in Georgia wrestling. Well, any territory, especially in the South back in the day, their biggest night of the year was typically Thanksgiving and then secondary to Christmas. But yeah, Thanksgiving night, huge night here. Usually they do a tag tournament, this time for the national tag team titles, which just happened to be stripped from Michael Hayes and Otis Sistrunk after Mr. Sistrunk decided this wasn't for him.
Well, actually, he went to Mars, but we'll kayfabe that.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that here on this. I don't need NASA coming after my ass. As quick refresher, I guess we should do. Talking about Thanksgiving night in the Omni, we had some big things go down, including, as I just mentioned, that national tag team title tournament saw the Armstrongs, father Bob and son Brad, walk out with the tag team title belts. And man, did they run through a gauntlet of challenges there. First round, the toughest opponents in the first round, if you ask me, Armstrongs over the Sheepherders of Jonathan Boyd and Luke Williams. Semifinals saw the Armstrongs over Kevin Sullivan and Wayne Farris, the future Honky Tonk Man. And in the finals, it was Bob and Brad defeating the WWF Tag Team Champions, Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito, who had just won the belts the month prior in the WWF from Rick Martel and Tony Gurria. And now the Armstrongs, the brand new national tag team champions.
Yeah, very interesting. Going back to when I originally watched this, I couldn't wait for that Saturday show to come on, so I knew how this tournament unfolded. And I never guessed that Bob and Brad would have won that tournament. I would have thought maybe it was going to be Terry Gordy and Austin Idol, or Hayes and Big Red, being Hayes had just been the last tag team champion. So very surprised that the Armstrongs came out on top.
Well, in 2024, looking back, I would have loved to have seen the team of Wrestling 2 and Rick Martel take the belts, but we all knew that wasn't happening. However, think about the original announcement when they brought up this tournament, the teams that were supposed to be part of it. Stevens and Patterson, which became Stevens and Super D, but also the Andersons. But Gene Anderson, well, he's having some health issues and just making a few shots at this point. And then, of course, even the Briscoe brothers were originally announced. And, of course, I don't want to say they watered it down, but certainly name value-wise, they had to come up with the likes of Sullivan and Farris and Ray Candy and Buzz Sawyer as a team as well. And, well, this is what we wound up with. Luckily, the Armstrongs walk out the champions, and they take on some of the top teams in the tournament from beginning to end, so it works out for them. It makes them world beaters.
Yeah, they definitely earned the title this evening.
Also, as you pointed out, in the first round of the tournament, they booked an odd match. Terry Gordy and Austin Idol against Michael Hayes, and his surprise partner was Big Red, as he announced on the TV leading in. That wasn't the weird part, because, yes, Michael Hayes is feuding with Austin and Gordy. What was weird was they booked this match as a lights-out match as part of a first-round tournament match. Sounds like they were just trying to incorporate these teams into the tournament because neither team advanced. Double disqualification, which is also odd considering it's a lights-out match.
Right, there should have been a winner. Now, I wonder if they did turn the lights out before this match started and then turned them back on again.
Flick 'em, flick 'em, flick 'em. Got to turn the lights out. It's 3 times signals a lights-out match, is what I was told.
Interesting. I've never seen a lights out match because, of course, at the time in the WWF, they never had lights out match.
No such thing, right? Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, the biggest thing of all, it wasn't even the tournament. It may have been the return of the masked superstar, Jammie. Superstar coming back for what he felt was rightfully his, getting that title match against the national champion, Wildfire Tommy Rich, in a Texas death match that night at the Omni. And of course, as he promised, Superstar walking out once again, but not without controversy. He is indeed the national heavyweight champion.
Yeah, and it was great to have the Superstar back, and things are still going to be interesting with Superstar for some time going on right now.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to these next couple pieces of TV. But before we get there, in between the Omni and television on Saturday, we had a Friday night show in Carrollton, Georgia at the fairgrounds. Brad Armstrong over Jim Duggan, Bob Armstrong defeating the French Angel, Michael Hayes defeating former Freebird Terry Gordy, and in the main event, Wildfire Tommy Rich teaming with Mr. Wrestling 2, scoring a win over the Superstar and Ray the Crippler Stevens by disqualification. This one marked a bounty match. Lucky for Tommy Rich, he had Wrestling 2 to back him up.
Yeah, it might have only been 4 matches, but we got star power in 2 of the matches at least.
Yeah, the fairgrounds shows are typically light 4 or 5 matches, it seems. And, obviously, they still brought some of the top talent out here. 2 main events, you could argue, and both Armstrongs on the card. So, fun night there in Carrollton. As we roll on, though, to the following day. The following morning is taped. It will air at 6:05 p.m., I'll have you know, Eastern Standard Time, on WTBS, going back to TBS Studios, Channel 17, Jammie, in Atlanta, Georgia, for some more Georgia Championship Wrestling. All right, guys, here we are, November 28th, and back in the Georgia studios, or what do they call it? The sports arena here in Georgia. Gordon's only trying to get that over anyway. As we see Gordon here, the host of the show, alongside Mr. Rod Piper.
Yes, we're now Rod from here on out. It was Roddy originally.
Roddy?
Now it's Rod. That shows you the respect between Rod and Gordon Sully.
Yes, that Roddy allowed him to call him Rod. Absolutely. There's definitely respect there from the Rowdy
exactly.
one. Well, so these next 2 episodes, I posted them as one file on my YouTube. You guys can go check it out, youtube.com/wrestlinggrenade, and subscribe while you're there because we're always dropping new stuff. But I wanted to point out these are hybrid episodes. And what I mean is there's some matches and some interviews on both episodes, but we don't have the complete episodes, unfortunately. However, I do have all of the results. So we're going to get into everything here.
That's what we're here for, the deep dive.
The deep dive. Going to kick off the program. Gran Apollo still here, scoring a win over Jose Medina. And then, well, there it is. If I didn't believe my eyes, right before us, Jammie Ward, it is the masked superstar to Gordon's right and the super destroyer to Gordon's left. It's time for an interview with both masked men. And, well, like I said, there it is. For the first time on TBS, you can see it with your own eyes, people. You're not seeing double doinks here. It's not just an illusion. Both masked men standing on opposite sides of Gordon Sully.
Exactly. You're right. It's not an optical illusion. For the first time, as you said, on TBS, we get both the Superstar and Super Destroyer to prove that they are 2 separate people. However, we're going to find out that, maybe something shady might have gone down in the Omni.
We are, as we continue on here. Very interesting that you would point that out, Jammie. I'm looking forward to getting into that. But Superstar right here showing off that newly won national heavyweight title, as he says, very few people can call their shots in wrestling, but the Superstar said he was going to get the title belt back from Tommy Rich, and that he did. And now on to those brilliant people out there, all the fans, Gordon Sully, anyone who claimed that Super D was in fact the Superstar. Well, they made all those accusations prove to be false. As you guys can plainly see, that is not the case. We got 2 men out here and 2 men headed to the ring. Superstar and Super Destroyer teaming up to take on Mike Jackson and Rick Thor. And if Superstar thought he could walk in here and just dominate the tag team matchup, he has another thing coming. Mike Jackson immediately unleashing a series of right hands and a drop kick, drops the champ to the mat and sends the masked man out to the floor in order to regroup. So Rick Thor going to tag in now, surprising me with a nice side headlock takeover on the much larger Super Destroyer. But Super D quickly back to his feet, escaping the headlock by tossing Thor across the ring, pure power by Scott Irwin.
Yeah, poor Rick Thor. Somebody has to be the weak link on that team, and it just wasn't going to be Rick Thor's night.
You know, I don't want to bring it up yet because we're going to see Jackson here in action a couple more times, but when we get to the end of the show, I want to point something out in regards to the format of these Mike Jackson tag team matches. Just remind me when we get a little later in the show, but right now, Mike Jackson tagging back in, running into a Super D high knee, then it's a swinging neck breaker from the Superstar, but he's going to pull Mike up from the 2 count, and then tag back to Rick Thor, but he eats a Superstar sit-out clothesline, followed by the Super Destroyer belly-to-belly suplex here this week. Going to give the masked team the win in just 4 minutes' time.
Yeah, Rick Thor after that match. What was that stuff that Dusty Rhodes used to advertise?
Oh,
for
the powder
pain
stuff.
medication.
Yeah,
the powder stuff. He was taking some of that powder stuff.
I know about the kind of pain you get just working for a living. But I can make that pain go away with almost no work at all. Because I take stand-back powders. Stand-back gets to work fast. Starts fighting pain and fever and even inflammation real quick. When my mama and daddy were coming along, stand-back was all a lot of folks took for pain relief. It worked fast then. It works fast now. Try stand-back powder. It's an idea whose time has come back.
Taking some powder for sure.
Well, that was Roddy Piper, but that's a different kind of powder.
Yeah.
But unfortunately here, Roddy Piper's new favorite wrestler, Mike Jackson, didn't come out victorious in this match.
No, he didn't get the job done, although, he needs to pick a better partner, right? As we hear more from the Superstar and Super Destroyer after the matchup, they have words for all the baby faces in the territory, even challenging the Armstrongs for their national tag team titles. So, Masked Superstar, he may have all the belts before it's all said and done, but while these guys are back out here, Big Red going to confront the duo. Red giving the duo crap for the way they beat Tommy Rich for the belt. Apparently, Red claiming that they pulled the old switcheroo. So Big Red, wide open to find a partner here, says he's going to take this team down, even unmask the hooded tandem. Boy, that would be fun to watch Big Red in there unmasking 2 villains.
If anybody could, it could be Big Red because he could splash them both at the same time.
Well, he might be able to splash them both at the same time, but he'd have to keep them both down. And I don't know if that's a possibility. As we go back to the ring, well, here's a newcomer to the TV anyway. A guy by the name of Big O getting ready to take on Joe Turner. Now, there's been a lot of discussion online, lots of false mentioning on the message boards of who played Big O, because there's been so many guys with the name O besides Steve. We're going to leave the joke out in this one. There was a Big Bad O, there was a Sweet Daddy O, and this here, Roy Obi played this edition of Big O. He was also Big Bad O, not to be confused with Big O. So, yeah, we have Big O out here, worked mostly the Outlaw promotions in the Georgia territory, Jamie, worked in Mississippi, Puerto Rico. He even did a tour of All Japan in 79. He thinks Giant Baba had him confused with someone else. But here he is, fairly good height on this guy, doing the Sweet Daddy Siki look, the bleached blonde afro and the beard. Gonna rough up Turner, pitches him outside on 2 occasions, and then locks in a Cobra clutch, it appeared to me anyway, as a rest hold at one point in the matchup. As you might suspect, the very basics from the O man here. Going to see him stomp on Turner's gut for the finish. You guys ever seen the Hitman? I'm going to use Bret Hart for an example here. When he would grab a guy by his ankles and threaten to stomp him right in the midsection, and then the crowd would go, "Yeah, do it, Bret," and then he would follow through. Well, that was the finisher here. A stomp to the gut by Big O, scoring the win in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Probably the only time we'll ever see that as a pinning combination in professional wrestling.
Yeah, you got to appreciate that stuff.
But even back then, I did not know who this Big O was at the time, from the magazines. I thought maybe he was Sweet Daddy Siki. I just wasn't, an experienced enough fan at this point to know that he actually was a nobody. Did you just say there was another Big O?
Yeah, there was another Big O.
Okay.
Yeah, but equally as famous, by the way.
Okay.
just putting that out there. Going back to that finisher, as you said, I said, wow, I've never seen that used as a finisher before, which likely explains why this is the only TBS appearance here of Big O in Georgia. Now, he'll continue to work some random house shows, at least for the next month, surprisingly, but no more TV time for Big O, who does get a victory in his one and only TV win. So he's got that in his book anyway.
During this project now, right, we have had the Big O, and if we go back to February, we had the Big K, Stan Kowalski.
He was.
Came in for one show.
Well, I don't know what that was about. He was certainly in town, that's for sure.
with one appearance and gone. Same thing with this Big O.
Oh, these guys belong on Sesame Street. I don't know what's going on here in Georgia right now, but Ole Anderson going to try anything and see what sticks. And Big O, he doesn't really stick, though he does again. Like I said, we're going to see him fill in some house show appointments as the weeks progress. But right now, we continue on back to Gordon Solian, Austin Idol, darling. Idol talks all the complaining around here by the crybaby baby faces. And now he hears that Leroy Brown is coming to town. Supposedly, he's a troubleshooter. Well, Austin, you don't care how big he is, how bad Leroy Brown's supposed to be. In fact, where's he at? Well, Austin, just turn around. There he stands, Leroy Brown, standing right behind Austin Idol as Jim Croce's Bad Bad Leroy Brown begins to play. My very first karaoke song, I'll have you know, Jamie. Austin backs up from the big man, but he isn't done talking just yet. Idol gonna poke his finger into the chest of the much larger Brown. And Leroy, what a fun little vision this was. Leroy grabbing the hand of Austin that's poking his chest and slowly begins to move it away, warning him, don't you ever touch me again. Austin Idol finally and wisely going to leave the segment as Leroy Brown deemed the policeman of Georgia Championship Wrestling moving forward. Heels beware.
And you know, if 15-year-old Jammie Ward's life wasn't good enough with Big Red around,
oh boy,
now we got bad Leroy Brown, who was one of my favorite guys during this run. And as you just mentioned about the Jim Croce music, Jim Croce only lived about a mile away from where I live now.
Oh, wow.
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time, of course. Well, that's pretty damn cool. Yeah, so I guess I had to have lived Leroy Brown in real time to know if I would have bought the gimmick or not. Everything I saw was obviously after the fact. And so watching him on tape throughout the 1990s, most of what I ever saw of Leroy in the ring, it just didn't do it for me. I didn't really care for his look. I didn't get the overalls and the construction hat and all that silliness, but he wasn't a great promo. And let's face it, he didn't have the greatest dental work to look at while he's cutting the promo. And then he didn't really do a whole lot in the ring. He was a big guy, and he had a hell of an elbow drop. I'll give him that much. But every time I saw him come on my screen, I just kind of cringed, like, this is not going to be a fun match. So I wish I could have lived that era and watched it, like you said, at 15 years old to see if my opinion would change on him. But I just can't get into Leroy Brown so much. But I can appreciate a storyline. It's like what they're doing right now with Big Red. I'm invested. I'm sure there are other moments where not so much would I be invested in Big Red. I've seen him in Memphis. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what goes on here with Leroy Brown as we continue on with TV. Up next, a matchup featuring a now heel. No real explanation here, but I have some thoughts I'm going to bring up to you after I mention the match here. Buzz Sawyer scoring a win over Bruce Gallagher. Now, I don't remember most of the upcoming Omni card, Jamie, but I believe one of the matches, if I'm not mistaken, is Buzz Sawyer versus Ray Candy. That's either at the next show or Christmas night. I'm not really sure, but I know it's coming soon. And they were a tag team Thanksgiving night. And remember, the week before Thanksgiving, Buzz Sawyer debuted on Georgia TV as a babyface. The following week, he was a heel. No explanation. It makes me wonder with him wrestling Ray Candy, who was not even in the territory. Do you think maybe he turned on Ray in that tag tournament?
I believe that is what happened. I don't know if I read it or just happened to remember it from the original airing back in 1981, but okay. I believe Buzz walked out of the match on him.
Oh, okay. See what happens when you hypothesize, guys. Sometimes you're right. So hopefully that's accurate. So it makes a little more sense. It explains Buzz's heel turn a little more. I appreciate you backing that up. I was just, doing some math in my head, so to speak, and it just said that seemed to make the most sense.
Yeah, because I remember, like I said, I think I remember it on TV. But also back then, the Kaiser magazines always had results of everything.
Sure.
And I believe I may have read that entire Thanksgiving night show in the Kaiser magazines, and they might have mentioned it there. I forget which one I heard it from, but it was, one or the other, and I'm 90% sure that Buzz just walked out on Ray Candy. But hey, if anybody out there actually knows the answer, please let us know.
Yeah, if you have a strong feeling about it, I'm sure it's accurate, but we're always open to, listening to other people, always getting help from the fans, the listeners out there. They're constantly helping us out with questions we have on the Bob Roop Show or here on Regional Rasslin. So, yeah, if you guys know exactly how that Sawyer heel turn worked, I think it had something to do that Thanksgiving night with Ray Candy, but I'll wait and see. We'll wait and see if anybody chimes in out there and podcasting land. It's not TV land here. We continue on back to the ring tag team action. Going to see the brand new national tag team champions, Bob and Brad Armstrong, out here taking on Rick Benefield and Jim Duggan. As the finish, going to see the match break down into a four-way melee. Brad Armstrong backdropping Duggan over the top rope, which Roddy Piper points out should be a disqualification. And Gordon Soley, he can't argue, Jamie, but it's Bullet Bob with a slam and elbow drop on Benefield. Going to put this one away.
Pretty easy victory for the Armstrongs overall. And Piper was a little critical there. He pointed out how Brad dumped him over the top rope.
Well, it was an illegal move.
And Scrappy McCowan just missed it.
Damn, that's Scrappy.
As Gordon pointed out, he just missed it.
Well, Gordon was in agreement. He's not going to argue that, yes, that should have been a DQ, Mr. Rod Piper, but the referee missed it, and thus the match continues, and the champions go over. Man, think about that. DQ might have been Duggan and Benefield, the number one contenders after that. I don't know. As we roll on, another matchup, lots of action here this week. Universal Heartthrob Austin Idol taking on the future Fantastic. I'm talking about Tommy Rogers. Is Idol going to flex and pose before the match, showboating in Rogers' direction? But as Idol turns around, he pays for it. Tommy with a dropkick into Idol's back, sending the Heartthrob face first into the buckle. Down goes Austin. Rogers going to jump on top. 1, 2. Oh my gosh, a near fall there. Surprising Idol. Tommy Rogers, who works a headlock. But Idol breaks free with an atomic drop, pitching Tommy to the outside. And then once back in the ring, nice backbreaker from Austin. And now it's back to the little posing from the Universal Heartthrob here before a vertical suplex and the middle rope knee drop. Going to give Austin the win, 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Well, if Idol doesn't pose in a match, then we really have to question whether it was actually Austin Idol in the match. That's a standard move for him to pose a little bit during the match.
I was going to say, if they take it, first of all, he used the knee drop for the finish, so he didn't do his leg lock. So if Austin didn't pose, I mean, we would have only gotten one out of like 3 of his moves here, right? So it's good to see Austin Idol scoring the win. As we go on, it's not Gordon Soley, but rather Rod Piper interviewing the new national tag team champions, the Armstrong. Funny how Roddy lately has become the interviewer to the interviewee Armstrongs out here, as Rod congratulating the underdog Armstrongs for their tournament win and turns to speak with the son of the team, Brad. Brad explaining the honor it is to be a champion and what it's like to team with his dad, Bob, the pact that they have together as family. Piper doing anything, though, Jamie, but listening to most of Brad's rambling, Roddy making noises, looking into the sky, smirking in a condescending way at what Armstrong had to say. Piper then going to make a little small talk with Brad, talking about his personal life, maybe the ladies. Brad admitting he loves those Georgia peaches. And then, there it is. Roddy Piper eased in, but he's going for the throat at this point. He asks, how do you feel about being in the shadow of your dad? As Piper just keeps going, calling him Junior, calling Brad Junior, Jamie, mentioning his father is an accomplished wrestler, and Brad, merely a kid. I wrote great stuff as Roddy doesn't give Brad time to respond.
Well, Roddy was simply being an investigative reporter right there, trying to get to the bottom of the issues. It was just an oversight on Roddy. Roddy was just so excited he wasn't giving Brad a chance to answer. And of course, Papa had to stick up for his baby boy.
Well, you know, sometimes a man's got to do what a man's got to do here, and Bullet Bob standing idly by long enough, watching Piper basically verbally humiliate his son Brad, and so the Bullet finally going to interrupt the interview, telling Piper, why don't you talk to me? Roddy trying to take some jabs at Bullet Bob, putting words in the Bullet's mouth, saying, so you're saying you guys were lucky to win the tag team titles. But Bob shows up Piper, admitting that maybe we were a little lucky, but things went their way, and they are the tag team champions. Roddy referencing Bob's skinny legs here, but the Bullet points out that he has a pretty good-sized upper body. Then he asks Piper, have you ever seen a racehorse with fat legs? No? That's because the Armstrongs are Southern-born, Southern-bred thoroughbreds. Think the way you want, Piper, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, Bob cut Roddy off on this interview. I'm a little disappointed because Roddy was really getting to the crux of the situation and what it's like for a father and son, the tag team. I haven't had this much fun talking about something since Michael Hayes was a heel. This is great, Roddy Piper. But to be serious for a moment, great move by Ole, pairing Piper up with Bob Armstrong as Piper's first nemesis.
Right.
Because the two of them, same level, and they can talk back and forth. So Great move by Ole here.
Yeah, Bob's been around the block for a long time, and Roddy's basically picking on the young kid, Brad, and Bob sees it, and he's still just kind of, what Piper's saying, all these condescending things, all these negative things, and Bob, this is the second time now, Bob just kind of blows it off. He's kind of like, hey, man, you think your way, I'll think mine. That's how I live my life right here in 2024, Jammie. A lot of people have opinions today, and if you don't agree with them, why, they block you, they unfriend you, whatever they do. And I'm kind of like Bob. I'm like, hey, man, you think your way, we'll think ours. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow if I have to. No big deal. And that's what, the way Bob's dealing with it, at least right now. But this is really the last interview, and it progresses a little more here. It's a little more digging by Roddy in this instance. But what I loved about it is Piper had been pretty even Steven with Gordon Solie. I mean, yeah, he gives the baby faces a little more shit on commentary, but in general, he's been pretty fair and very respectful of Gordon. We've seen him interview a couple of heels in the past. I know Ole Anderson. I believe he had another one as well. But finally, Roddy in here talking with a babyface, one that can hold their own, as you said, putting him in here with Bob. Now, Brad, not ready for this. I don't know if Brad ever got ready for a duel, a verbal joust with Hot Rod, but Bob Armstrong able to hold his own. As the Armstrongs walk away this week, Piper quips, well, if you're ever in a horse race, I'm sure you'll win. Ha ha. Roddy Piper got to get the last line in. Hot Rod, not done yet, I don't think, with the Armstrong family.
No. That's going to last, spoiler, quite a while.
Quite a while, and I'm looking forward to it each and every week as we go back to the ring. Time to watch bad Leroy Brown in there, taking on Joe Turner. Yeah. Joe Turner, the opponent. Brown in there, overalls, construction hat and all. The bell sounds, and Leroy jumping around, the ring very much bouncing as he lays into poor Turner. Big back elbow to the face and a splash. Going to end this one in near record time. Match goes 1 minute, 10 seconds. So we heard him earlier. He's back in the territory. Leroy Brown gets the quick win.
And that's how you have to treat Leroy Brown. It's very similar to Big Red. Get him in there, squash him, and get him out. Now, this isn't the first experience I've had with Leroy Brown at this point.
Okay.
I had seen Leroy Brown feud a little bit with the JYD in Mid-South when Mid-South was part of Anderson's World League Wrestling that would air on the Satellite Program Network. And I also got to see a little bit of Leroy Brown in Florida before he arrives in Georgia.
Okay.
Of course, in both instances, he was a heel. So maybe that's why I liked him so much, because he came right in it as a babyface. And he said that he was going to be the policeman in Georgia Championship Wrestling. That nobody's going to get away with anything anymore.
And anybody that ever watched 1980s WWF, we would learn Hacksaw Jim Duggan was referred to as the policeman of the WWF for a while. And they did it here first in Georgia with Leroy Brown. He's coming here to take charge and take on those pesky bad guys, breaking all the rules. And it's kind of funny because Leroy Brown was kind of a career heel to me. I know he did some babyface stretches other than here in Georgia, but I always saw him more as a heel. And, I don't remember if I got to see any of Leroy Brown in real time. If I did, it was near the end of Bill Watts' run with the UWF. And I don't even remember if I saw any Leroy Brown matches during that period or not. So again, I go back to, I can only watch in hindsight. And I see a lot of talent in hindsight that I never got to see live growing up that I fell in love with. I just love certain guys' promos or their wrestling ability, etc. Leroy Brown, not so much. But again, much like Big Red, if they use him right in short doses, I'm on board with it, Jammie.
Exactly. I mean, he goes to Mid-Atlantic after this in 82 and, does the original natural gimmick with the blonde hair in Mid-Atlantic. And
I remember. Now that I remember too. Another reason why I'm not a giant.
Yeah, I got tapes a little bit late. I was about a year behind on tapes with that, but he didn't excite me like he did in Georgia because he was the good guy.
Right.
I just preferred him that way. Even when he was with the Zambui Express, him and Ray Candy together, I always thought the team was just kind of boring. I never took them, seriously or thought they were a threat. But this version of Leroy Brown, I really enjoyed. And he's here for a little bit, so that's the best thing about it.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with him because, again, a guy that size with limited ability, I'm on board with them as a hyperactive baby face, right? Get that energy, get in the ring like he did, jumping around here, hitting a couple moves and taking it home. As long as you're doing that, I'm cool with it, But like you said, as a heel, slow and plodding, big guy with, limited abilities, just doesn't really cut it for me. But right now, babyface Leroy Brown, so far, we're in week one, and I'm here for it. As we continue on, we get another interview from the Superstar and Super D, the Masked Men. Superstar stating that he was supposed to wrestle again here today, but he has decided he's not going to do it, Jammie, because he's the national champion, and people are going to have to pay to see Superstar wrestle. So Super D going to take his place, and we hear Super Destroyer speak for the first time on TBS as he's ready to go to the ring to get things done.
Yeah, well, he didn't have Mephisto here to speak for him anymore, and Superstar didn't want to talk for him all the time.
No, and that's good too, and I think that they were wise in never allowing him to speak until Superstar is back. He's back now, so now we can hear Super D speak since we know for a fact these are two different men.
Exactly, and I'll let you describe the match, but we're going to see something that affects pro wrestling forever in this match.
Oh, well, if that's a fact, I'll let you tell me what it was, because I'm not sure I have it in my notes here, but I'm looking forward to that. It's Super D taking on Rick Benefield, a total mauling here as he ties Rick upside down in the tree of woe, Tony. Super D working a bear hug for a bit of time, taking it all the way down to the mat before releasing it and dropping the big leg brother, but then pulls Benefield up at the 2 count. Then it's back to the bear hug, which goes on, I wrote, forever. Then finally, he decides to deliver his superplex finisher, getting the win 6 minutes and 10 seconds. 4 minutes of which was a fucking bear hug, guys. Would have been far more effective as the finish without that dead time in between.
Well, they had to stretch out television.
I get why they did it, Jammie, but a bear hug for 4 minutes? I don't know. Kick him around. Kick him like a dog, Tony. Well, you tell me. What transpired here that changed the world?
Well, actually, I may be wrong on it now that
Okay.
I'm thinking about it. But
Okay.
I don't remember in the earlier matches of the Super Destroyer him really using that superplex. And Gordon really put it over into play-by-play on this, which made me think this was the first time he used it.
I don't recall what he's been using here in Georgia, and I apologize, guys, because I watch so much WWF and Georgia and
I'm just
Memphis
drawing a
and-
blank. Maybe senioritis is kicking in, but I just don't seem to remember it on his earlier appearances.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I can't say for certain. I can't remember if we've discussed him using it here in Georgia, but I know for a fact he was using it in Mid-South before this because he did it with Bob Roop on Bob's first night there. He was going for the finisher, and that's how Bob fell on top and won the title, the Louisiana title from him. So I know he was using the move prior to Georgia. However, I don't know if he's used it here in Georgia up until this point. Certainly not in the TBS studios. That's not the ring I would use it in necessarily, at least on the weekly.
Yeah, my point is, being now he's on national television,
Yes.
and it's being seen. Tons of wrestlers used it, especially Barry Windham.
Yeah.
After this,
Yeah, Wyndham would use it. I think Bob Orton was the next most famous person using it, for years underneath Super D. But for all intents and purposes, I've always heard that Scott Irwin was the one that, I don't want to say invented it, but he was the first one that anyone knows did the move, and aptly named the superplex, taking the suplex. Now, why does Gordon call this a superplex, but he calls the regular move the suplex? Wouldn't this be a superplay?
I agree with you, Ray. But Gordon is Gordon, so Gordon's going to say what Gordon wants to say.
I've actually even heard him call the suplex a time or two when he's feeling, but we'll just leave that alone. As a post-match, Superstar going to send Super D back in the ring to do more damage on the job guy, but the policeman, Leroy Brown, out there to run them off. Leroy Brown grabbing the mic from Gordon, telling him that the rule breaking ends starting right now. I don't know if he can keep everyone from breaking the rules, but he certainly has it out for these two guys.
And what an impact Leroy Brown's making on his first show. I mean, you would have thought he was in Georgia for a long time.
Yeah. It's funny how they could do that with certain talent. Just debut them, and by the end of that first piece of TV, you've got them over. Some guys take weeks to get over. Some guys, it just takes the right angle. It takes the right persona. And in this case, people love seeing that gigantic man standing over Austin Idol, backing Idol away, pushing his hand down ever so gently. He doesn't need to come in there with like a big badass. Just, hey, buddy, I'm giving you this chance. You leave right now or we're going to have an issue. And of course, Austin left, and now here he is running off the mask team as well. So he's certainly doing his job here early on in the show. Here's another match that's apparently lost to time. I couldn't find it anywhere on this show, but boy, it was likely a pretty fun squash. I don't want to call it a squash. Pretty fun TV match, Jammie. Brad Armstrong scoring a win over Mike Jackson. That'd be a good one.
Oh, yeah, Mike probably made Brad look like $1 million in that match.
I have no doubt. I hope someday this entire episode pops up because I would love to see that match. Now, I'm sure it wasn't a 5-star classic. It wasn't meant to be. It was on TV, but to see those two in there, I'm sure there had to be some fun spots involved.
Yeah, and if Roddy was doing the play-by-play, he'd probably gone crazy for that one.
From there, we get a quick promo from the Wildfire Tommy Rich, who finally shows up this week after losing the title at the Omni. He says, you know what? He was sitting in the back, Jammie, and he's done feeling sorry for himself. He's back up again. He is the Wildfire. Superstar and Super Destroyer are in trouble. Wildfire Tommy Rich has recovered both physically and mentally, and he's back on their trail.
You know, Tommy has a lot of mental issues, doesn't he? Right.
He does. Every time he loses, he wants to take his ball and go home.
Yeah, he doesn't stand up like a man and take it. Exactly. He takes his ball, he goes home, not for very long, maybe just like a quarter of the TV show, and then he always shows back up and gets that Wildfire back.
Yeah, imagine if, guys like Mike Jackson had this type of emotional issue. They would never be able to return to TV after losing.
Don't pick on Mike Jackson. He was a professor.
I was putting him over as emotionally stable. He's able to handle defeat and come back in the same hour to wrestle again.
That's from dealing with all those students. He's a professor after all.
Well, we hear from the Wildfire, and then we see him in the ring. Tommy Rich scoring a win over Iron Mike Sharp by disqualification here after the Superstar and Super D come to ringside, and they send in good old Funky Cole Jose Medina to attack Wildfire Tommy Rich here. Tommy going to fight off Mike Sharp, Jose Medina, as well as the Masked Man. Tommy Rich fighting everybody off, and he's ready to take on all comers.
Yeah, but Medina didn't move too quick to get in the ring, though.
No, well, he had to be prodded to get in there, but I guess money talks, and then Medina walked. Tommy Rich clearing the ring pretty much in record time. Didn't really have much of an issue getting rid of Medina and Mike Sharp, but Sharp getting lucky here on TV. He had a matchup scheduled with Flair. Didn't have to do a job there. Had a matchup here with Tommy Rich. Didn't have to lay down again. So Iron Mike, I guess you can consider him lucky to a degree.
Yeah, and I believe this may be the end of Iron Mike Sharp on TBS. Yeah, not quite sure he's going to return with us again. And, Mike's been one of my favorites for the last 6 months of Georgia time and the year plus in real time as we've been doing this podcast. So it'll be, a heartfelt loss for myself seeing Iron Mike Sharp Jr. bid goodbye, but show up in Mid-South and become a champion.
Yeah, that one, I'm sorry, Jammie, but that one puzzled the hell out of me. In fact, Sharp about to leave the Memphis territory pretty soon in 85 as well on my other project here, Memphis 85 in Regional Rasslin. So I'm going to be Sharpless here soon, at least for a while. Although he'll always be on my Grenade show, Mike Sharp just a staple on World Wrestling Federation TV for years to come.
I was just about to say that, Ray. You'll have to handle the load all by yourself. You are the Joey Styles of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network.
Oh my God. As we go back to the ring, Ray the Crippler Stevens teaming with Ole Anderson. Wow, what a team. Taking on Rick Thor and El Gran Apollo. As Buzz Sawyer going to join commentary, and he's apparently now a heel. And also not a very good commentator, I noticed here. Apollo taking it to both Stevens and Ole to start things out, but Rick Thor tagging in, and he's in all sorts of trouble and in the wrong corner. As we see Ray Stevens deliver that pile driver to end the matchup, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. As Gordon says, the Anderson brothers win the match here, and then calling the Anderson brothers over for an interview before realizing, oh wait, that's not Gene, that's Ray Stevens.
It was just a force of habit.
Yeah,
for Gordon.
we can call it that.
I don't think that was a chemical influence there. No. I think that was just a slip of tongue on that one.
Oh, okay, all right. I didn't know if that was a screwdriver issue or what was going on with that, but we close with quick comments from Stevens and Ole, two of the greatest to ever be in the ring, as Gordon refers to them both as former World Tag Team Champions, pretty much confirming that Gene no longer full-time active in the ring, and they kind of quietly disbanded the NWA World Tag Team titles right now.
Right, but a big tournament will come around next year.
It will indeed. A very big tournament that seems to go on forever if it actually ever happened. But that's in the Mid-Atlantic territory, and maybe we'll get there somewhere, somehow with someone. But right now we're in Georgia 81, and we go on to Chattanooga, Tennessee Memorial Auditorium that night, November the 28th. Big Red over the French Angel, Bob Armstrong defeating Jim Duggan. It's Terry Gordy over El Gran Apollo. Masked Superstar with the national title on the line, scoring a win over Wrestling 2 by disqualification. It's Austin Idol battling Michael Hayes to a double DQ. That couldn't have been a pretty match. And in the main event, Bob Armstrong back out for a second time, teaming with Tommy Rich over Ole and Gene Anderson. Again, Gene isn't really working any house shows, but he seems to make the trips to Chattanooga. And it makes me wonder if he had a few points there.
He probably did, just like Columbus.
So
Ohio, that is.
That's yes. And so Gene pops up in the main event, and who knows how much he worked here. Ole could have easily handled the lion's share for sure out there. But what a fun match if you think about it. In there, if they were all healthy, the Andersons versus Tommy Rich taking the beating, and then Bob Armstrong waiting for that hot tag.
Oh, yeah. I can just see Bob coming in now with that hot tag.
Oh, my God. And, of course, tagging back to Tommy to let him get the pin. But in this instance, that's probably what happened, actually, if I think about it. But going back here, Austin Idol, Michael Hayes, sounds great on paper as far as name value goes, but probably not the most prettiest of matches.
Definitely a clash of styles between those two guys.
Or too many similarities.
But well, you know what? If Michael Hayes wasn't an always doghouse so bad, they should have let those two guys just unleash on television. It would have been tons of fun. But yeah, you're right. The similarities, or they should have done a double turn Gordy face heel and Hayes back heel, and have Hayes team with Idol. That would have been a great team.
Yeah, Ole obviously cutting off his nose to spite his face in regards to not really wanting to push the Freebirds, especially Michael Hayes at this point, but he can't question his ability to draw money, so he has to still use him to some degree, but not to the level they were. And we'll see eventually when the Freebirds leave the territory that they didn't necessarily need the Freebirds to draw money or need the Freebirds to have a main event, but it certainly helped. And you're absolutely right. And I don't know what Hayes was doing. Maybe it was too much, and no matter what, it wasn't worth Ole's time or sanity to keep these guys around, especially Michael back in this time period. I don't know what Michael was doing. He was certainly in his prime, partying prime, and Ole, no-nonsense promoter, booker, partial owner of the territory, wasn't going to play the games of the Freebirds. Vince didn't play it either very long. But Michael Hayes still around for now, and he's feuding somewhat with Austin Idol here, as we know. They don't do a whole lot on TV with it, but we do get a little bit, and just enough to bring it to the house shows. As we move on to November 29th, Marietta, Georgia, Cobb County Civic Center, Buzz Sawyer over El Gran Apollo, Brad Armstrong defeating Jim Duggan. It's Bob Armstrong over Terry Gordy by DQ. Now, that would have been fun. Austin Idol again taking on Michael Hayes, scoring a win this time on countout. And the main event going to see the Superstar and Super D over the team of Wrestling 2 and Tommy Rich in a bounty match.
Now, wait a minute. Is Superstar trying to collect his own bounty?
Well, he doesn't have to pay anybody out if he gets the job done himself, right?
Well, I guess you got a point.
Bob Armstrong over Gordy by DQ. That ought to be a fun one.
Oh, yeah. That's good enough to be the main event right there. Anytime you got Bob Armstrong in the ring.
Yeah, and Gordy's been here for a year on top. I mean, God, give me that any night of the week. I would have accepted that for the main event on a show I attended. As we go on, November 30th, Augusta, Georgia, Bell Auditorium, Gran Apollo finally scoring a win here in recent days over Jim Duggan. Brad Armstrong defeating Mike Sharp. It's Michael Hayes teaming with Big Red over the team of Austin Idol and Terry Gordy by DQ. Tommy Rich scoring a win over Ray the Crippler Stevens in a bounty match. And the Superstar scoring a win, National Heavyweight Championship retained over Bob Armstrong. Another fun main event.
They're just rolling right along on these house shows. And here's something that just popped in my mind off of what you just said. Gordy and Hayes have now been here 15 months.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a long run for guys,
anywhere
in a territory. I mean, even Tommy Rich hasn't been here that long.
No, not in this run for sure. Not yet, anyway. That'll change. Just give it time.
No, true. Well, yet.
We go on December 1st, Macon, Georgia at the Macon Coliseum. French Angel going to a draw with Ted Oates. Buzz Sawyer over El Gran Apollo. Tag team champions Bob and Brad Armstrong over the duo of Terry Gordy and Bryant St. John. More on that in just a moment. Ray the Crippler Stevens defeating Mr. Wrestling 2. And Wildfire Tommy Rich scoring a win over the national champion Superstar by disqualification. And I wanted to go back here to the tag team match, Armstrong's over Gordy and St. John, because this marks, from what I could find, St. John's final match in his long, early run, late 70s into the early 80s here in professional wrestling. We're going to see he suffers, I believe this is his second leg injury in the last year or so. And it sounds like he had planned to come back, but not really sure. I don't know if he becomes disillusioned. I'm not sure if the injury was far worse than he thought, but this is pretty much the end of Brian St. John.
As we'll find out for the next television show, this is his final match. I mean, does he come back later in the 80s at all?
No. He's done.
No,
this is it. December 1st.
I thought Barry Rose told me he became something to do in the medical field. after all this is over.
Well, I would have to imagine the guy got a job somewhere at some point. And I think when I Googled some results that he popped up on one of those retro type shows, and he like came out of retirement for a match, but I don't really count that decades later.
No.
But yeah, this is pretty much the end of his wrestling career, unfortunately. He had a fun run with Stan Lane down in Florida. There's a little footage of that out there, and I really enjoyed it, and I did some digging and read about them a little more because of that. So that's a fun little tag team they had before this. And Brian St. John's been here most of the year, and he's just kind of been quietly having the match of the TV program more often than not. Really capable hand, really good as a heel. And unfortunately, this is it.
Yeah, I mean, him and Stan were also in Georgia.
Yeah, that's true.
What was it, May and June in 1980? They were in for a little bit before he leaves, and then Stan stays around.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good call. I remember that as well when I was going back and watching the 1980s stuff.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Rasslin podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jammie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Rasslin. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Rasslin, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews. Sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
We go on December 2nd, Columbus, Georgia, Memorial Auditorium, Gran Apollo over the French Angel. Bob and Brad Armstrong defeat Mike Sharp and Buzz Sawyer. There's you a team, Jamie. Mr. Wrestling 2. Mr. Wrestling 2 over the Masked Superstar in a strap match. Obviously the title not on the line, but 2 going to score the win over his former nemesis there. But that's not even the main event, because we also have Big Red and Michael Hayes over Gordy and Austin Idol. Still not the main event, because Wildfire Tommy Rich challenges the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair coming to town here in Columbus, Georgia. The Wildfire going over by disqualification.
And that's kind of out of nowhere, because we hadn't seen Ric Flair for a little bit.
Well, I think they're just doing the loops because Tommy worked Flair in a couple cities. Maybe they promised to come back. Maybe Fred Ward had it coming here in Columbus, and they had to bring Flair in. And because Fred Ward had some points, some serious points in the Georgia territory, you know, I'm sure that this is like a make right. You know, here you go. You can have him too.
Maybe he was just passing through from Charlotte to Tampa and stopped off in Columbus for the afternoon.
Well, you know, noticeably absent from this show are Ted and Jerry Oates. So I have to assume that they took both of their paydays, gave that to Flair on top of his own normal payday to kind of make up for everything and afford the nature boy in town. But he's going to retain the title as Tommy goes over by DQ there. Then we go off December 4th to Lawrenceville, Georgia at the Central High School. Buzz Sawyer over Gran Apollo. Brad Armstrong defeating the French Angel. Bob Armstrong over Ray Stevens by disqualification. And Michael Hayes teaming with Big Red, scoring a win over Terry Gordy and the Masked Superstar. I don't necessarily like that result.
It's okay. But
send the fans home happy.
Yeah, exactly. They're going home happy. But the important part of this show is, and it seems to be a theme with some of the other house show results, they've been feeding the French Angel to Brad. Good guy for Brad to learn from. Yeah, he's not necessarily going to keep up with Brad's speed, but he certainly can keep him learning, honing his craft out there and just kind of listening to him. And it's not going to hurt Angel or Frank Morel, if you will, to put Brad over at the end of the night. No. And that's what Frank Morel's there for. Yeah, and Ole, well, we'll talk about that as we continue on with this next episode of TV. We move forward another day, December 5th, back in TBS Studios, another episode of television hosted by Gordon Soley, and it appears to be Rod Piperless this week. Best I could tell anyway, Jamie. I did not hear his voice. I didn't hear Gordon introduce him. So I guess we were Piperless. Something big must have been going on in Mid-Atlantic, and that was come down. That was my guess. Something going on up there in the Kakalakis. Roddy Piper tending to that. But the time has arrived, guys. It's time for the Stanley Works Bout of the Month. Man, I hope you mailed in your vote, Jamie. Steve-O taking on Brian St. John. And then we learn that both men are injured. Wow. Brian St. John on crutches. Steve-O sporting a bandage on his left hand. And this, guys, is why you don't book shit like this 2 months in advance. I guess they booked guys so low on the card, especially Brian, to the point where they were like, nothing's going to happen to these guys. Well, they were wrong. Both guys injured. As Gordon announces that now both men out of the matchup, Brad Armstrong going to be the replacement for Steve-O, and Charlie Fulton replacing Brian St. John. So people that have been voting these two men up until now, anybody that voted for St. John, they have to realize they've been screwed. Oh, absolutely. And Gordon does refer to Charlie Fulton as Charles to make him sound a little more important. Charles Fulton here, friend of Rod Piper, is St. John and Steve-O both pull a name from the crates of mail. One side for Steve, the other side for Brian. Makes sense. So names are pulled for the winner and the loser. We then hear from Steve-O. He wishes that he could be in that ring, but he has to recover, Jamie, vowing to return once again. Gordon elaborating that Steve has a wrist injury and a staph infection. Meanwhile, St. John with an ankle injury, apologizing to his fans who chose him. Yeah, he kind of reminded me of Brian Kendrick in this interview. Okay. Well, you know what? For a guy who is never given any interview time, I thought he did perfectly fine with what he had here. But it had to be deflating because all eyes were on the TV set. All these people that wanted to, and people are going to laugh when I say this, but anybody who voted simply to try to win a garage door opener or even a tool kit,
I mean, they're sitting here watching this, whether they're a weekly watcher or not, right? Whether they're a typical wrestling viewer or not, because they want to see if their name was pulled and if their guy wins or loses.
Yeah, I mean, I can honestly say I did not mail it in because I don't have a garage.
Well, that's fair. We didn't have one until 88 or so, I don't believe either. So, yeah, my grandfather was a craftsman guy. He, all the Sears tools, man. Lifetime guarantee, Oh,
that's what my dad was. Always a craftsman.
Craftsman, baby. As we go to the ring, we see the matchup. Brad Armstrong with Steve-O in his corner, taking on Charles Fulton, if you will, with Brian St. John in his. So the winning fan going to receive a garage door opener. Meanwhile, the loser that was drawn going to receive a Stanley toolkit. So really, there is no loser here, at least if your name was drawn. Brad going to start off with quick offense, but Fulton looking good with a pair of equally quick pinning combinations to no avail. Armstrong begins to work over Fulton's arm, but Charlie finally able to cut Brad off and hammer away, wearing Brad down with a rear chin lock. Armstrong finally slugging his way free, channeling his dad with some jaw-jacking snug shots and a dropkick going to get Armstrong too. Brad trying for a double underhook suplex, but Fulton countering with a backdrop. Armstrong, however, countering the backdrop into a sunset flip attempt, going to get 1, 2, and yes, the 3. And just like that, Brad Armstrong, your winner. Match goes 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Nice way to get Brad over, and Pops wasn't even out there to assist him.
No, very good call. Yeah, Steve-O really wasn't out there to assist him. Steve-O, we know he won't cheat. Not for anyone. So he wouldn't even cheat for himself when he was given that opportunity.
And this is kind of a sad day, too, because I think this is the end of Steve-O. We're not going to see him for a while. I could be wrong, but I think this could be the end.
How apropos,
personality.
If it's true, how apropos that Steve-O goes out like a fart in church.
I'm losing all my guys here. I'm going to be losing Michael. I'm losing Steve-O. I'm losing Iron Mike. At least Frank Morrell will still be around.
Frank Morrell, clearly a good buddy of Ole's, I'd have to think. If Ole had good buddies anyway. As Gordon Soley going to interview Kevin Sullivan and Wayne Farris. Again, that's the future Honky Tonk Man, guys. They were part of that Thanksgiving night tag team tournament, and they say they came to Georgia with the intentions to win the national titles. But they were robbed in the tournament, Jamie, because they were pinned by the illegal Armstrong. So they're looking for revenge and potential return matches, this time for the belts.
That could be a nice little feud if pushed properly.
If pushed properly. I mean, Kevin Sullivan's involved. He was here before he really got over that last time around as a babyface and then a heel. And so people remember Kevin, and boy, is he well put together here. We saw him do some bodybuilding prior to leaving, but man, I don't even know if he was in this shape then. My God, he looked great here. Honky Tonk Man, not so much.
I thought Kevin didn't look as good as he did when he left. I mean,
really?
When he left, he was really ripped because he was doing the bodybuilding contest. I think he looks, instead of being ripped here, I think he looks more solid and athletic here. As in, like, I'll agree with you, in great shape, but not that bodybuilding shape that he had when he left back in, what was it?
I'll give you that. I think he was more ripped when he left, but I think he's more jacked up now. Can we say steroids, maybe, perhaps? As
no, not in wrestling. That never existed in wrestling.
Well, Gordon Soley
Superstar Billy Graham.
Yeah, ask him, brother. As Gordon Soley says, Wayne Farris, not to be confused with the anchor man in Miami, because, well, that's relevant to anyone other than people in Miami, right? I don't understand the point of that. Solely trying to put over Miami, I suppose, here. This is Wayne Farris, but not the one. Don't be confused with the anchor man in Miami.
I have no comment for that one. Gordon is Gordon.
Got to put over his local buddies back home. As Mike Jackson with some quick moves here early on, but it doesn't take long for the heels to get him down. And so Jackson going to crawl over and tag to Turner. Double stomp there by Kevin Sullivan and a total beatdown. As Soley says, the heels are running amok for several minutes of the matchup. Somehow Turner finally able to tag in Mike Jackson, who is quicker than a hiccup, by God. Backdrop to Kevin Sullivan. Mike even popping Wayne Farris sleeping on the apron. Kevin, though, going to take back over. So Mike making the quick tag back to Turner and the heels with a double back elbow. And Farris with an elbow drop, scoring the win in 6 minutes and 10 seconds.
Yeah, nice little victory for those guys. And as I just said, that would have been a nice feud. Unfortunately, this team isn't around very long.
No, they don't stick around as a tag team anyway, but, this is probably a good time as any to bring up a little format, a formula, if you will, that I noticed with Mike Jackson in these tag team squash matches. They love Mike in the ring because not only can he do well on offense, but he makes them look great on the defense. So he takes some great bumps, no doubt about it. And so what I've noticed is Mike Jackson takes the heat, then he tags to the other guy, and he takes the heat, right? And then Mike tags back in for the hot tag, but he always manages to tag back out for the other guy to do the job. So they try to protect Mike at the end of the day. Even though he gets the hot tag, he's never the one taking the pin in these tag team matches.
I had noticed that. Excellent analogy there, right?
Yeah, I just noticed that observation this time because he was in so many tag matches and back-to-back TVs, and it just stuck out to me. I'm like, wait a minute. It's the same thing every time. Not the matches, but just the formula. But I love it. They're, even the name talent, they realize what an asset Jackson is, and they want to protect him as best they can anyway.
And he's going to have a nice long run. I mean, at least up through 85 or 86 on TBS, and then he goes over to Mid-South.
Yeah, I don't know when Mike comes in and out with the Mid-South off the top of my head, but I know he's going to be in Georgia for quite a while moving forward.
Oh yeah.
As we got another matchup coming up, but in between, just a quick clip here in the footage that I have shows Ric Flair, the NWA World Champion, cutting a promo in a checkered jacket. Those always stuck out to me when Flair would wear those, but the Nature Boy going to cut a promo here, but it's clipped out. Who clips out a Ric Flair promo, especially in 1981? I don't know.
And he had his glasses on. How can you tease us like that? It's the same thing that happened a couple of weeks ago where they brought Austin Idol on, and all of a sudden they clipped away from the Austin Idol interview.
Well, what you going to do, man?
You know, whoever made these originals. But
Sure.
We got to be appreciative because
exactly.
At least we got something.
Yeah, appreciate what we do have is all we can do. As we go back to the ring for the Masked Superstar and Super Destroyer teaming up to take on Vinny Valentino and Bob Russell. But wait, Big Red out here joining Gordon before the matchup can begin. Red has photographs from the Tommy Rich Superstar match from Thanksgiving night in the Omni. One picture shows the Superstar's mask torn during the matchup. The second picture shows the mask no longer torn as he wins the title when the Hooded Man defeats Tommy Rich, furthering the accusations that they did in fact pull the old switcheroo. As Superstar, he's heard enough, comes over and addresses the situation, ripping up the photos and calling them doctored.
Because, Big Red had made backups. He had to. And then he'll turn them over to the NWA. Extra prints.
Yeah, those were the originals, I'm so sure. Big Red says he'll be back as the Superstar ripping up the evidence, if you will. My question is, where was the video cameras that night? The Big Red's having to use photographs out here because we're talking Thanksgiving night in the Army. You're telling me they didn't film it? I don't know. But the Masked Men in here playing a game of Top This as they both just annihilate both of their opponents all over Valentino and then Bob Russell. Relentless beatdown and quick tags by the Hooded team. Hooking clothesline from the Superstar, followed by the Super D and the Superplex. Going to get the win on Russell in 4 minutes' time.
Ole just didn't want to spend the money. That's what it is. The only time since, September, really, that they've showed anything was Dusty Rhodes being blinded by Kabuki, and that's because Dusty told Ole, you got to make me look good, baby.
And I still haven't seen that footage.
You still haven't seen that. Do we see it here?
No, I do not. Not in my footage.
Okay, I saw it, and we're going to say it, and then maybe it's in the upcoming weeks that we're going to say it from when I was looking ahead, but you definitely see what happened that night.
I think the only footage we've seen beyond what you just mentioned was that black and white footage from the cage match that got the Superstar, quote-unquote, suspended. And that was not at the Omni, so I don't know the last time we saw Omni footage.
Yeah, it's got to be something I watched ahead then and saw, because it's Kabuki and Gary Hart are in the ring. Flair just standing in the back, not doing a damn thing, just enjoying it. And Kabuki sprays Dusty in the eyes, and you would think that, somebody shot Dusty the way he's screaming.
Well, I was going to say...
And then everybody runs in, Kabuki's attacking Dusty, Gary Hart's trying to pull him off. It's a nice little piece of film.
I'm looking forward to that. I know the feud's coming. I know Dusty's going to paint his face up and go to war. And he's actually going to take it to a couple of territories, in fact. But yeah, going back here just for a moment, when I look at this, and you mentioned that they haven't really shown footage, and maybe Ole's too cheap to pay for the cameras. I have to state, well, who says that was Ole's camera that filmed that? Now Dusty knew what was going to happen that night, baby, and he knew where the money was drawn, so he was going to have his own film crew out there if he had to. So
exactly, that was my point. Either he told him, or he got it done himself and told Ole, you're going to air this.
Absolutely. So post-match here, Superstar and Super D joining Gordon Solie at the podium, but Big Red returns as promised with a manila envelope with more pictures that prove Super Destroyer replaced Superstar, and they cheated to beat Tommy Rich in that national title Texas death match. But Superstar, he has enough of all of this, Jammie, attacking Big Red, but the big man immediately begins fighting back, leading to Super D jumping in to make it a 2-on-1. But Red, he don't give no never mind, taking on both guys, taking out both guys, tossing them both in the ring. But finally, the number game becomes too much. The masked men take over until bad Leroy Brown makes the save, evening the odds, running off the hooded duo. And I know Red was never much in the ring, but just excellent use of him here in these small doses.
Excellent use of both of those guys. I mean, that was a killer tag team. And we're still, 2 weeks into Leroy Brown. I was in all my glory at this point watching Georgia Championship Wrestling.
When I think about, and then the bell rings, that's what I think of here when I think of having to watch a match with Big Red and Leroy Brown versus the Superstar and Super Destroyer. However, at the same time, what I saw here on TV, I'm not even thinking ahead to the matchup. I'm popping for what I'm watching right now, and this is working.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, even I, at this point, probably want to go back and see one of those matches. But, hey, this angle is great.
Oh, it was fun times. I enjoyed it. And Big Red's energy is just second to none. I mean, he gets in that ring, and for a guy who can't do a whole lot, you don't notice because he just brings so much energy with him. And those heels were bumping for him. And it was just a fun segment overall. And then Leroy Brown, the policeman, coming out to even the odds and run the heels off as we go off now to an interview with Ole Anderson, kind of a generic promo. Ole here basically putting over the talent in Georgia Championship Wrestling, telling the fans, if you think you can do better, come on down. Ole liked to do that around this time frame, but he's putting over the territory, putting over the talent as Anderson continues to wreak havoc as only the Anderson name can do. And then it's back to the ring, and we have not seen him here, I don't believe, as of yet, at least not in footage. Talking about Jimmy Garvin has arrived.
And he's not gorgeous yet, but he has the mustache.
Not quite gorgeous, but he does have that porn mustache, indeed. He didn't have the perm here yet either.
A little bit of the perm, not the full gorgeous perm that he had.
Yeah, it wasn't gorgeous yet. There you go. Exactly. It was jamming.
But the interesting part is, I'm going to jump ahead here on you, Ray.
Okay.
He's taking on Pacific Northwest. He's taking on Don Owens legend Mike Miller.
Yeah, the future mean Mike Miller, just Mike Miller here, but what a big guy, and he's going to work Crockett around this time too. Unfortunately, just a prelim, but he's learning his craft, and he's certainly paying his dues, and a big guy, Mike Miller, out here taking on Jim Garvin. So it's kind of fun to see this as a TV matchup. Garvin with a lot of the basics early on, utilizing some amateur wrestling holds. Pretty fun stuff. I'm sure he utilized that a lot in Florida before coming over here. Miller finally able to knock the wind out of Garvin and take control, but Jimmy Garvin eventually reversing a whip into the corner, delivering a monkey flip and a nice running forearm shot before applying the sleeper hold O'Doom. Going to get the win in just 3 minutes and 20 seconds. And of course, post-match, Garvin kindly wakes up Mike after the bout.
Yeah, nice little first win for Jimmy Garvin on TV here. And I might want to add, Jimmy Garvin was one of my mom's favorites. Even his run's not that long, but my mom liked Jimmy Garvin.
Yeah, it's funny to see Jimmy here. He is just coming out of his run in Mid-South just before this because Bob Roop turns on Jimmy Garvin, and Jimmy Garvin not around much longer after that here in the fall of 81, and Garvin just stopping off in Georgia in between.
Yeah, I guess he's here for about a month or so, and then he'll be going back to Florida where I think he becomes gorgeous.
Gorgeous. I love it. As we continue on, we get an interview this week from the Wildfire Tommy Rich himself. Back to the ring for action, seeing Buzz Sawyer scoring a win over Don Gilbert. And then the action continues on tag team matchup featuring Austin Idol and Terry Gordy teaming up to take on Rick Benefield and Mike Jackson. Let's see if that formula continues here, Jammie. Jackson starts with Gordy using his speed to stick and move, but a drop kick barely budges Gordy. Terry going to plow Mike over with a hard forearm shot. And then a trim-looking Austin Idol tags into the ring, but Jackson with a reverse body block takes Austin down and then makes the tag out to Rick Benefield. As things change immediately, heels taking over here, Benefield trying to escape a Gordy takedown, but Terry locks in a half Nelson, rubbing his face into the mat. And then Austin Idol in with an inside cradle driver, I called it. Not exactly a specialty there from Austin Idol, a wrestling hold. Tried for an inside cradle and just kind of dumped poor Benefield on his head.
Yeah, I was actually concerned for Benefield when I just rewatched this match. I mean, That was a nasty looking bump.
Knocked him a little loopy, but Benefield tagging back to Mike Jackson, who comes in on fire. There's the hot tag, but he dives into an Austin boot in the corner. It appears the heels looking for their finisher. Idol landing Jackson into that backbreaker. Gordy going up for that knee, but then Austin dumping Jackson off his knee and Terry just jumping off the middle rope with a fucking stomp to the face. I wrote, oof. So they were going for their finisher, at least it was their finisher 2 weeks ago on television when they teamed up, but clearly they didn't want to make Mike do the job. So they allow him to go back and tag in Benefield. It's Idol then with a middle rope elbow, and Gordy comes in with a pile driver. Ooh, a nasty pile driver at that. Gives the heels the win. 5 minutes and 45 seconds.
Yeah, another team that could have very well been in the tag team title picture. And I don't know if you caught it, but I went back and rewatched this match a second time. No mention of Michael Hayes.
No mention of Michael Hayes, nor is he here on TV this week, from the best I can tell anyway, yeah.
And he wasn't around last week either, as far as we can tell.
Well, maybe he was watching his brother play baseball. Maybe he was hanging out with Frumpy back in Alabama. I'm not really sure what Michael was up to here this week, but it doesn't appear that he was in TBS studios. Good call. I hadn't even noticed up until this point because they haven't really been using him as much on TV. He's
definitely in the doghouse.
Definitely in the doghouse, a small one at that. As we continue on, look at this, a guy who is not in the doghouse, talking about the French Angel, Frank Morel in here, taking on Jim Gallagher. Gordon Soley putting over the Gallagher brothers, Jim and Bruce, as being double tough, which only makes the Angel look that much tougher as he dominates throughout the matchup here. Morel begins working the shoulder relentlessly, tossing Gallagher to the floor, just dumps him to the outside, with Jim now back up on the apron, Angel dropping Gallagher throat first across the top rope, and then finally back inside the ring, Angel with more shoulder work, Gallagher with a last-ditch effort trying to fight back, throws a few punches, but Angel with a pair of backdrops and the shoulder breaker. Going to get the win here, 6 minutes and 30 seconds. And I have in my notes clearly, Ole Anderson had an affinity for Frank Morel because he'll even use him in that short-lived Chattanooga promotion down the road.
Yeah, and he gets a push at that promotion.
He does, indeed.
Because he's part of Cornette's little family that he has going on there. And, hey, I know I'm not the only guy with the Frank Morel love. I heard Gene Jackson in the 1985 Memphis giving Frankie some love. I'm wearing you guys down.
It may be some Jammie Ward influence. Frank Morel looked competent out there in that particular match, but he, that was compared to his partner, who I can't remember who that was at this point in time, but lack of talent in Memphis in 85 right now. But that's the other project we got going on, guys. Go check it out with Gene Jackson, Memphis 85. As we've got some more matches here this week. Ray Stevens out here cutting a promo for himself, as you mentioned. Mephisto gone from the territory. So we see Gran Apollo over Charlie Fulton. Also, Jimmy Garvin back out scoring a win this time with an abdominal stretch into a cradle hold on Jose Medina. Ole Anderson back for an interview as well. And then we have one final matchup this week on TV, Jamie. Going to see Kevin Sullivan teaming with Wayne Farris yet again, taking on Vinny Valentino and Tommy Rogers. And Rogers and Valentino early on working the arm of Farris, but Vinny backed into the wrong corner and Sullivan going to take over like a buzzsaw, ripping through Vinny here. Farris tagged back in and Tommy Rogers able to tag in as well, but Wayne quickly catches him in the breadbasket and puts the heels back on top in the action. Sullivan with a nice knee lift on Tommy. Farris, though, going to telegraph a backdrop, however, and Rogers leaps up and makes the tag to Valentino. Vinny Valentino back inside, catching Wayne with a nice drop kick, leading to a four-way melee. And as referee Nick Patrick forces Tommy Rogers back to the corner, the heel's going to land that backbreaker flying knee drop combination that we saw Gordy and Idol use a couple weeks ago. It's Farris with the backbreaker holding Valentino there. Sullivan off the middle rope with that diving knee, going to give the heels the win. 2 minutes and 54 seconds.
Yeah, another nice win to hopefully lead into some matches with Bob and Brad.
Yeah, hopefully.
That's what you and I want to see anyway. But just a real quick second, we've gone from Tommy Rogers being a contender for the World Junior Heavyweight Championship all the way down to being used as enhancement talent 6 months later. Kind of sad. Rogers is a great talent.
Oh, Tommy Rogers is one of my favorites of all time. Unfortunately, his size, it certainly hindered him as a single star. But as the Fantastics, Tommy Rogers, and, no disrespect to Bobby Fulton at all, but as a kid, Tommy Rogers was the Fantastics to me. I just loved watching him when he was in the ring and do his thing. And, even when he got that little brief run with ECW, I popped. It was, what, Tommy Rod? Where did that come from? And, of course, we got the Tamikaze out of that, which would become the Christian's finisher for many years, the Unprettier, the Kill Switch, whatever the hell he calls it now. But it's kind of fun to go back and look at the career of Tommy Rogers because he was always meant for some kind of stardom from the very beginning. He just always had it in the ring. He was really good at what he did. And unfortunately, like you said, he's not really being utilized to his abilities here, but he's also still green to the business. And, we know he's going to go on to do some big things as the Fantastics.
Yes, and you're right. He was the Fantastics. I always liked him more than I did Fulton. Never really a big Fulton fan, even though he was the original Fantastic along with Terry Taylor.
Right. The Fantastic ones. Put a lot of thought into that name.
That was that little, Georgia promotion there.
Yeah, Chattanooga.
Yeah, the Chattanooga promotion that Ole ran in '83 to try to supplement the Georgia town since he was trying to go nationwide at that point.
Right, yeah. The secondary promotion, basically. It was like the farm system almost. I hate to call it that, but I mean, it was kind of like that. It's like the NXT to Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, the developmental territory kind of at the moment.
Yeah,
it's a shame it didn't last longer.
No, I would have been interested to see what they could do with it. It was really fun for what it was. We come to the end of this week's episode of TV. We hear an interview from Terry Gordy and Austin Idol going to close the show as Gordon Sully bids us adieu. So long from the Peach State of Georgia. And we roll on that night, Jamie, December 5th, Chattanooga, Tennessee, back in the Memorial Auditorium yet again. Buzz Sawyer over El Gran Apollo. National tag. Oh, we do get the matchup. Bob and Brad Armstrong over Wayne Farris and Kevin Sullivan. Wrestling 2 defeating French Angel. It's Michael Hayes and Big Red over Austin Idol and Terry Gordy. And Wildfire Tommy Rich beating the national champion Superstar. Although I don't see a DQ or count out here. It always could have been. Who knows? But if not, the title clearly was not on the line as Tommy goes over.
And Tommy should go over, but not get the belt. But, the one good thing about Superstar being the champion, at least we're going to get to see the belt more often on television. Tommy never wore the belt.
No, and, that's because he probably forgot it back at the hotel room or wherever the hell he was staying. I'm wondering why, because there were periods where Tommy would show up with the belt and I would forget, oh shit, he is the champion. And that was kind of weird, especially when he's your top babyface. Hulk Hogan would have never been seen without the title when he was the champion. But I guess that's why he was Hulk Hogan on the national scale and Tommy's here in Georgia 81. Not that they weren't trying and he wasn't over, because he absolutely was.
And he's going to continue to be over, and they're going to keep pushing him.
Boy, howdy. You got that right. As we continue on to Gainesville, Georgia, the old Georgia Mountain Center, December the 6th, Brad Armstrong going to a draw with the French Angel. Gran Apollo over Jim Duggan. Superstar defeating Wrestling 2. Tommy Rich scores a win over Super Destroyer by disqualification. And Austin Idol and Terry Gordy over Michael Hayes and Big Red.
I would have loved to have seen that match.
Me, not so much. I don't know how pretty the action would have been there, but we roll on. Augusta, Georgia, Bell Auditorium, December 7th. Brad Armstrong over Ricky Harris, the future Black Bart. He's making his way into Georgia now. Buzz Sawyer over El Gran Apollo. Bob Armstrong defeating the French Angel. Super Destroyer scoring a win over Michael Hayes. Leroy Brown.
Interesting.
It is interesting, and it's telling. As a tag team action, we saw them sort of form a unit there on TV, talking about Leroy Brown and Big Red going into action over Terry Gordy and Austin Idol by disqualification, and Tommy Rich again defeating the Masked Superstar. And then it's off December the 8th, Tifton, Georgia, the Tift County High School. Jim Duggan going to a draw with Rick Harris, subbing for Bruno Sammartino Jr., who was originally announced a couple weeks back. Apparently, Bruno no longer in the territory, it would seem, Jamie.
Yeah, I was just going to get ready to ask you when we were doing the TVs that we hadn't seen Bruno for a while, so maybe Bruno is gone by this point.
Yeah, I think on the last episode, he was still working TV jobs. He was in tag team matches where his partner would do a job. I remember them working the Andersons, if I remember correctly. So it wasn't too long ago Bruno was still here, but I believe we've seen the end of him. A lot of these guys are coming to the end of their runs, and it's good time to cut the fat. And I know, you're a big fan of like Mike Sharp and guys like that, but really they've done everything they can do in this run for me anyway. So I think it's a good call to kind of refreshen things up and bring in a bunch of new talent. So we'll see what happens here throughout the course of December as we continue on here in Tifton. It's Gran Apollo over Mike Sharp. Bob and Brad Armstrong defeating the French Angel and Terry Gordy as a tag team. And Tommy Rich going over Superstar. So I had pondered that Saturday night or Sunday night result, if it was even accurate, but it seems like an entire week here of Rich going over on Superstar. So I have to imagine non-title matches.
You're probably right. I mean, if it was a DQ, you would have probably seen it or a count out.
Yeah,
so
by this point
right
anyway, but this is like the third time this week we've seen it in the same result every time. So I'm thinking what you're thinking. It's likely a pinfall, so we're likely doing non-titles this time around. As December 9th, Columbus, Georgia, Municipal Auditorium, Gran Apollo going to a draw with Ricky Harris. Gran Apollo doing double duty, also scoring a win over Mike Sharp that night. It's Ted Oates back here in Columbus going to a draw with the French Angel. Boy, how the mighty have fallen here in Columbus. Whose Cheerios did the Oates brothers piss in to go from basically headlining in Columbus at the beginning of the year to going to draws with Frank Morrell?
Obviously, them and Ole didn't get along very well.
It would seem something along those lines. Also on the card, the Armstrongs over Ray Stevens and Buzz Sawyer. Wow, that's interesting. Big Red picking up a DQ victory over Terry Gordy, and Tommy Rich teaming with Michael Hayes to put away the Super Destroyer and the Superstar.
Yeah, one final time for Tommy Rich and Michael Hayes.
Yeah, I mean,
together.
It's so odd, after the old bounty placed on the head of Tommy Rich. I'm talking about the original bounty this year by the Freebirds, by Michael Hayes, and now here they are teaming up. My, how wrestlers are forgiving, or maybe it's just all that CTE that makes them forget. I don't really know. But we continue on. One more show result here this week on Regional Rasslin, and then we're going to wrap things up. December 11th, Friday night in Porterdale, Georgia at the high school. Going to see Brad Armstrong over Ricky Harris. Big Red defeat the French Angel. Buzz Sawyer over El Gran Apollo. And Wrestling 2 teaming with Brad Armstrong, scoring a win over the Masked Superstar and Mike Sharp.
Mike Sharp gets pushed up to the main event. Nice way to go out.
Yeah, Mike Sharp, as you said, on his way out, but he gets to work a main event, even if it is in high school. But I did notice the last couple weeks of house shows, we've seen a whole lot of Buzz Sawyer in the ring with Gran Apollo, and that's because both guys came up from Florida at the same time, so they're very familiar with each other.
Yeah, I remember seeing Apollo on the Florida TV when I was watching.
Yeah, Apollo was his own worst enemy, not in the Buddy Landell sort of way, but in the attitude, the arrogance, from my understanding. And a lot of people didn't get along with him. And I've heard reports of him hitting on Barbara Clary and making her feel uncomfortable.
Well, that'll get you out of Florida real quick.
In a hurry, for sure. Well, Jamie, that's going to do it here this week. I love it. We're wrapping things up. Now, we didn't have full episodes to work with, but I think we gave everybody as much as we could with what we had to work with.
No, we give it our all every time, right? And sometimes we have a lot of info to work with. Sometimes we don't. We just got to do our best.
Well, you know what that means as we wrap up here this week, Jamie. We've got 2 episodes left in the Georgia 81 project. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It's been a long, winding road to get here. We've seen a lot of awesome talent come through, from Ted DiBiase and the Junkyard Dog to Ken Patera and just Jimmy Snuka on down the line. So many great talents we got to see and watch here on TV and read the results and follow the storylines and the angles on television. Just lots of great stuff. And we're not done yet. We still got a month left here as we conclude the month of December. 2 more episodes of the project still waiting for us.
Yes. And the month of December is going to be giant.
Giants, you say? Is there a pun involved? Okay. Well,
There's
we'll leave
a
it
pun
there.
there.
Well, one thing I will point out, we've got some big Omni cards still coming because they're going to do Christmas night in the Omni, and then they also do New Year's, I believe, Eve night in the Omni. So a week later, just like they did in 1980 into 1981, they're doing it again this year. 2 weeks in a row, 2 big nights at the Omni that we're going to cover as we wrap up. But we're not there yet. We still got more of December to cover next time around.
Yes, and we get the return of Roddy Piper, and it's a lot of good stuff still to go. It's a short time left, but there's still a lot of good stuff to go.
And as you tease, Dusty Rhodes will be making his return to exact revenge on the Great Kabuki. So we got that to look forward to. The Nature Boy Ric Flair coming back into town as well to defend his NWA World Heavyweight title. Against who? You guys will have to wait and see, but just lots of great stuff still to come here. Even though we've only got, 4 weeks at most left in this project, Jamie, we've got a whole lot to get into, and I'm looking forward to that next time around.
Yeah, always, Ray. Always have a good time doing this.
Well, Jamie, you want to send any shout-outs? We're going to wrap up here.
I'll give a quick shout-out to my boys over at the Other Ship Podcast. If you've never checked out the Other Ship Podcast, you should. Currently going on is their Super Duper Crockett tournament, which I think they had over 124.
128 teams, I do believe.
I know you're one of the voters, Ray, and some of the top
brother.
wrestling fans in the world have voted on this. And of course, it's a big fantasy tournament. Last year, I was fortunate to be on all the shows. This year, I'll be on a couple of them. So please check that out. Plus, we still have Survivor Series preview, Survivor Series review shows coming up. I think we may even do Saturday night's main event preview and review shows, and also a big Christmas television show special podcast.
Yeah, I love my Christmas TV shows and movies and things of that nature. Getting into that already. We're getting a jump on it as the kids are, hey, Dad, we want to watch this. And I'm kind of tuning it out. I'm in the room when it's on, but it's like, I don't want to watch it this far away because I so want to watch it again when I can actually focus on it. But I've already seen a few things pop up on my TV screen. And I'm looking forward to doing it again before we actually get to the holiday. So I'm looking forward to you guys doing that down the road. But yeah, we got a lot of things coming up on all the great podcasts here. We recently had Gerald Briscoe, aka one half of the Briscoe brothers, on the Dangerous Conversations podcast. Really fun conversation between Jerry Briscoe, Wildfire, Tommy Rich, and Doug Gilbert, talking about getting some guys together to talk some stories. That was a good one. Thanks to Gene Jackson for making that happen. And we've got so much going on here, Jammie, at the network, always coming up with new ideas and new things. And before we close up, I just want to encourage everybody to go over to patreon.com/WrestleCopia, because now we've got the video casts live and in living color, talking about the Coliseum video cast. I've been doing those with Gene Jackson, welcoming other guests as well. But the Pro Wrestling Academy video cast with Dan Ginnity, and on the great rare footage that he has, going back and dissecting that, looking at names like Terry and Dory Funk Jr., Bruno Sammartino. I mean, the list goes on and on. A young Jumbo Sharuda who looks like a 10-year pro in year number one. That guy, you want to talk about a natural, he was it. So lots to going on right now over there at Patreon. Encourage everybody to give it a try. No subscription. You guys can cancel any time, but just give it a try because we appreciate your donations. That your monies goes right back into paying the bills here. And it's bill collecting time, unfortunately, this time of year for us. So we can certainly use your help, and just appreciate everybody out there, all the great loyal listeners of Regional Rasslin and all the shows, and also all the loyal patrons that we do have.
Yeah, and you have 2 levels of Patreon too, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. We got the $5 all access tier, all the great stuff there, the insanely detailed show notes, early access to all the shows that we drop here, sometimes a week early, some of the shows, so you guys can go check all of that out. And then, of course, the VIP Superfan tier, which we added this year, which features all the video casts and even more insanely detailed show notes. I talked about this, I think, with Gene in the past. For instance, the last episode that we covered of the Pro Wrestling Academy, Dan Ginnity, myself, we put the show notes together, 70 pages of show notes for one episode. Now, of course, we can't hit on all of that on the episode, on the podcast that we covered, but you guys can go subscribe to Patreon. You guys can read all of the results, all the show notes that we put together there. And that's just 1961. That's not counting all the episodes we've already done or we're going to be doing in the future. So they're just giving you a little taste of what's out there on our Patreon.
Yeah, definitely well worth it.
Absolutely. So that's going to do it here this week. Jammie, appreciate you as always. Thanks again for doing this along with me. It's been a long ride, but it's been a fun ride, and we're not done yet. Got a couple more weeks of Georgia 81 to get through, and then who knows? We'll be announcing something, but not quite yet. So we'll save that for the last episode of the project. But right now, Jammie, just want to thank you again. We're in the month of December. We have made it.
Yes, and my honor to be on with you again, Ray, and I can't wait till we convene together again to attack 1981 Georgia Championship Wrestling.
All right, guys, that'll do it here this week, but we shall return for more Georgia 81, Memphis 85, and UWF 86 very soon. I'm your host, Ray Russell. You can follow me on X at Rasslin Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Rasslin Grenade. And don't forget that $5 all access tier over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. And until next time, we'll be back soon with more Regional Rasslin, where we talk the territories.